After the model has been assembled, I start with priming it with matte black primer from Vallejo. I know the picture for this video says no airbrush, however I don't count the priming step since it's just going to be a complete coverage with one color. I also bought this ridiculously expensive floppy rubber makeup thing, since the general idea of adding blush as makeup and dry brushing are similar. Ultimately, I hope this will easily remove excess paint without pulling off all the moisture from the bristles, as a paper towel will do. It sorta works here as I dry brush the first metallic paint, but I have a feeling if I didn't use the extremely thin Vallejo metallics made for an airbrush, then it would have applied smoother. I will try adding medium to thicken the paint a little in my next Necron video. Here I add a second lighter metallic paint, focusing mainly on where the light would catch the most, such as the upper shell, the knee joints, and the upper tentacle and tail. Where its use for removing excess paint may not have been as useful as I was hoping for, this tool definitely makes cleaning the dry brush easier, as the small rubber nibs help pull paint out of the center of the brush where a paper towel has trouble reaching. This may be a trade-off, however, as I wonder if this may wear the brush out sooner. With the dry brushing finished, I apply dark tone wash everywhere before coming back with a little bit of the previous metallic paints to do any cleanup on the larger plates that were left with unsightly stains. Since I'm aiming for the Szarekhan, however you pronounce this word, their paint scheme, I start laying thinned orangish speed paint over the areas I decided would be the coppery metallics and let it fully dry. I then add a second less thin coat as a shade, covering about 60% of the surface area while avoiding the areas that should be receiving the most light from an overhead light source. Since these miniatures are made for a table game, I'm avoiding any crazy dynamic lighting and just assume it's high noon as the light source. This will help the model look better on a gaming table from any viewpoint. I then add an additional shade of unthinned speed paint, covering about 30% of the surface area now, only aiming for what should be the darker portions, such as under the limbs or places that do not catch the light well. I finish off the coppery colors by adding a red speed paint to about 10 to 15% of the surface area, aiming now for the darkest regions only. Here I did not realize it until after I finished painting the model, but I grabbed poppy red where I should have used bright red, as I did on the scarab swarms. Honestly though, I think the poppy red may have come out better. I intend to try both bright red and poppy red in my next Necron painting video, so I can have a fresh side-by-side comparison. The scarab swarm bodies are just too small and they don't make for a good comparison to this larger plasmacyte. Moving on to the steely metals, I follow a similar approach to what I did with the coppery colors, thinning Tyrian navy and applying it to everything that will not be glowing green spheres in the end, or part of the base. After sufficient time for drying, I apply a second more concentrated application as a shade to lesser areas and work my way to increasing the shadows. I can then finish all of the metal areas by applying a thick edge highlight with a bright metallic, followed by a thinner edge highlight, with the latter focused more on the upper areas and corners. This edge highlighting step alone took longer than all of the other steps in this video combined, including this editing. I am not looking forward to edge highlighting in the next Necron video, as it will be 10 times worse. Literally. For the glowing bits, I start with a mix of an yellow off-white with pure white and some medium. I try applying this smoothly over several coats to avoid building up too much texture, as I'll be applying a speed paint over these, and any texturing will cause the speed paint to pool, creating dark spots on what should be a bright light source. I then thin down pure white with medium and add brighter white spots to each of the previous areas, focusing the white towards the centers where I want it to be the brightest. This is again done over a couple of lighter coats, trying to keep the texturing to a minimum. With the white now dry, I decided to lean on a crutch and apply a gloss varnish over these light sources. Gloss varnish is good at filling small gaps and creating a smoother surface, which is why it's so reflective. I use this smoothing action to help reduce the amount of texture I did build up, and I wait for this to dry before proceeding. Once dry, I added thin ghillie dew to all of the light sources. I'm aiming to keep this color mostly to the light sources, but if I get a small amount on the surrounding areas, I'm not worried about it, as it'll just be integrated in the next step as I start working towards building out the OSL effects. Speaking of OSL effects, I start adding thin shamrock green to areas around the glowing bits to begin building said OSL effects. The shamrock green is darker than the ghillie dew, so I take care not to get this color directly on the light sources themselves, and focus on the areas bordering them. I return again to the mixture of matte white thinned with medium and apply this to what will be the brightest areas, covering a smaller area than the last time I used this same mixture. I finish up with applying unthinned jungle green to these brighter areas, before finishing out the base and calling it a night. This is the end result. For lessons learned, I need to pay attention to the colors I'm grabbing, since I did use a different red than I had intended as the final shade for the coppers. However, this may have worked out as a benefit, as I think I like this combination better. I'll definitely try this out in my next Necron painting video and compare them side by side. I've also made the obvious realization that these worn out army painter brushes I've been using need to be thoroughly cleaned, or more likely need to be completely replaced. I do not use metallics with my good brushes, as it can damage the bristles, and these brushes can no longer hold a point, making edge highlighting and even painting in general very difficult. I may try picking up a handful of synthetic brushes for these steps before I try another 40K project. That's going to wrap it up for tonight. I hope you learned something or were inspired to start or expand your own collection. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below, and if you like the content of this video and would like to see more, please like, share, and subscribe. I'm Jim with Working with Miniatures. I'm truly grateful for your time, and I bid you a fond farewell. Till the next video.